You guys ready? You guys ready? All right, I'll call this meeting of the General Government and Finance Committee to order at 6 o'clock. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call, myself, trustee Myers and trustee Nyrider are here. Trustee Kaminsky is absent excused. With that, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the minutes of September 19th and October 3rd.
September 19th, October 3rd.
I'm sorry, I will second that.
All right, we have a motion. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment tonight?
Technology. Scott Heffley, W159N10514 Old Farm Road in Germantown. Just two things for the committee tonight. I have been looking over budgets. I have been looking over resolutions and things, and I brought this up to the general village board, but is it really correct? Maybe I can get the answer since we have a small meeting here. Is it correct we are using 20-year general obligation bonds to finance a deferred maintenance item for the library? Roughly $205,000, I think it was presented. I would ask, why are we doing that? Why are we should have money set aside for deferred maintenance, whether at library or any other building. Why wouldn't we use ARPA funds? We have those available. Why not take it out of the excess in the general surplus, which I believe was told 3.5 million that we have built up? In lieu of that, why not out of the unaudited surplus from 2011, which I have been told repeatedly is over $1 million? That seems like a good use to do deferred maintenance rather than financing it for 20 years or 10 years or whatever you're doing with the general obligation. I just don't think that we should take maintenance items and finance them for 10 to 20 years. That's just my feeling. So hopefully that's been discussed. I don't know. The other thing that I also had a question about is the public grant program. This kind of popped up on me. I understand that later on this evening, we'll be discussing some amendment to that public grant program from 2015. Admittedly, I don't know much about it. I haven't heard much about it. Question I have is, where are the funds coming from to fund this grant program? You must have funds if people are going to go through the process of doing RFPs to get said funds. So how is this being funded? I'd like to know. I don't know that you have extra money in your budget, so I don't know if it's coming from the room tax fees we collect from the hotel and motel people. Hopefully that is not the case, that they're coming from there. I don't know where else they're coming from, but I'd like that question answered. Also would like to know why we haven't run this by some committees we have that deal with things that go on in the village. Why did we vet this through our tourism committee, our park and rec department, our historical preservation? Or in lieu of that, our July 4th people, have they all been contacted, discussed, and have they seen this proposal? So it affects all of them. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anybody else here for public comment tonight? All right, if not, go to this. Excuse me, with that, we will move on to new business item A, which is capital data server update. And we have capital data personnel here tonight to give us a presentation on that.
Good evening, all. So we're here for the agenda to talk about a recent outage to one of the village servers. Sorry, Craig Tomlinson, Capital Data. Jeff, do you want to?
Jeff Winters, Capital Data.
So we'll get to the server outage and kind of talk through the reasons why and the impact to the village there. But at first, I'd like to take the opportunity to really paint the picture of the assessment process that we originally went through at the start of this engagement just under 12 months ago. And that will really highlight kind of the lay of the land, right? The risks and the recommendations that we identified during that assessment phase that we went to, and really the strategy and the solutions that we were recommended and that we've been executing on over the 12 months to get to where we're at now. So I'm going to kind of go through these slides. I was going to go through them quickly just to kind of give you an overview. I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but really kind of, just show the level of detail we went through and the conversations that we've had with Steve and with Aaron over the last 12 months around the environment. As we originally discussed at the start of this engagement, kind of one of the first phases that we do here at Capital Data when we start engaging with any customer is what we call a data-driven architecture assessment. So this is a very data-driven, detailed discovery of the current IT systems in your environment, current state, and then we highlight any risks or recommendations that we found out of that assessment. So we went through all the environment, each department. So we went through the village, the police, DPW, etc. Each part of your IT environment, including the end user workstations as well. And then, talked in depth around any, current state, any risks, any recommendations. So you'll kind of see here some of the discussion. I'll carry on. So we went through in detail risk recommendations. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but really the summary and the assessment and the conclusions that we came to was, just, a lot of legacy systems, a lot of band-aids put in to hold the systems together, really. Unlicensed systems, and really just a mismatch of technologies and solutions altogether, and a lot of old equipment. So you can see we've kind of gone through each department, made recommendations of how we'd recommend we resolve that. So again, this was kind of presented just shy of 12 months ago. You can kind of see some of the, we've kind of gone through all the end of life and highlighted any equipment that's out of support and things like that. So I'm going to jump through these. Feel free to slow me down if you've got questions. But this is just, an example of the process we went to and the detail we went to. So we made recommendations around, how to implement, enterprise level backup solutions, how to stabilize the environment from a server storage perspective, how to secure the environment, and also the network as well, and how to stabilize the connectivity as well. So again, these were all, proposed to Aaron and Steve originally. We created those current baselines and then proposed solutions with costs. We did an in-depth, diagram of what the connectivity and the networking looks like within your environment. We highlighted risks here as well. As you can see, there's some kind of, a lot of legacy infrastructure here in place from a network connectivity perspective. You see, like in the police department, there's a lot of risk around dispatch with switches being I think they're end of life 2018, right, Jeff? So it's probably
2018
Yeah.
when they went end of life.
end of life. So, you've got a lot, equipment here that's not supported by manufacturers and multiple years old right now.
I think the big concern there too is when they're past end of life, you no longer get security updates from the manufacturer. So that's always a risk for some sort of a breach, right? So we like to try and keep those up to date and supported by the manufacturer for software updates and security updates.
And again, not to kind of go into too much detail here, but lots of different manufacturers, lots of consumer grade equipment. I think that was a big outcome from, our assessments is you look at some of even just your internet connections for for the village and DPW, they're, your home internet connections are faster than those these days. And they are, in certain circumstances, consumer or home grade internet connections that have been put in place there. And again, from a hardware perspective as well, there's been a lot of what we'd class as consumer grade equipment that's kind of been put in with no overarching, strategy or a thought process, right? So we've made recommendations, and we're going to talk about this after this discussion around how we would stabilize the network, how we would implement a more strategic, more holistic security solution across all the departments. So we've, these are what these diagrams are showing there. And again, gone through all the risks and the recommendations. I think I've kind of touched on those, right? Again, a lot of consumer grade systems, no real strategy, mismatch of technologies. And then a key one to call out as well is, when we've looked at all levels of the IT equipment, the IT infrastructure is very limited levels of redundancy built in, especially for some more of your critical functions like police and things like that. So that was the original assessment. We worked in collaboration with Steve and Aaron to put together a holistic strategy to remediate, and further enhance, the IT environment at the village. We've summarized, a lot of the projects that we've accomplished over, less than 12 months of being engaged with the village. One of the priorities was migrating email to the cloud, removing that risk of it being on an old server here at the village. That's been completed. Lack of Microsoft licensing as well. That was a big one that was identified at the start of the engagement was, the village was not compliant from a Microsoft licensing perspective. A lot of the end users were using home licenses in a non-compliant fashion. And then even on the server side of things, licensing wasn't purchased, which was causing servers to randomly restart. So we remediated the licensing perspective, and now the village is compliant or mostly compliant from a Microsoft perspective, or is working towards full compliancy there. Just best practice cleanup configurations, right? Just stabilizing the environment from all those risks that we found. I think Matt came up with a good analogy, right? You brought us in really to remodel a very old house, and every time we keep taking down a wall or doing some, form of remodeling activity, we uncover some other issue, right? But we've been working methodically from the ground up, right, from the foundation to implement those best practices and put the village in a more solid, place moving forward. We've implemented multi-factor authentication across all the departments. That was a priority requirement for cyber insurance. There was no real endpoint management solution, or there was no endpoint management solution for your laptops and your workstations within the village. We didn't have an accurate number or inventory of what, who's using what computers or how many computers you had. So we've implemented a solution now where we can centrally manage all those computers, those endpoints, and then we can secure them and push out patches on a scheduled basis. We've also implemented standardization from a new computers perspective as well. So when new computers are purchased, they are automatically built with the village standard applications with antivirus. Everything's standardized now moving forward. So that's in a better place. We've implemented and standardized antivirus across all the endpoints. So that was another big risk that was identified that, again, because there was no visibility or standardization of just the workstations as well as the servers, antivirus wasn't running on all the computers or all the systems. So we've standardized and rolled that out across the board. And then implemented an enterprise class backup system. Previously, the backups were just going onto USB drives, like thumb drives. Now there's an enterprise backup system at the police department. And then a second copy of your backups is sent to a secure cloud location in what the new terminology is immutable copy, which means if someone was going to try and encrypt your data or a ransomware attack, they have no mechanism to encrypt your backups. So there's always one safe copy to restore back from in the cloud now. So those are, the key highlights and accomplishments that have been executed over the last 12 months. And then ongoing projects, one of the major ones is the police department ProPhoenix hardware refresh. So the police department invested in some new hardware with our recommendations on better enterprise class software. That has been implemented. All the servers running on the old hardware has been moved over onto the new hardware now. So that project is complete as far as a hardware refresh. We still have to upgrade the ProPhoenix application servers to a new version, but all the police department infrastructures now running on this more standardized enterprise class infrastructure that is being backed up with the new backup solution and sent to the cloud. So the next step for that project is, because the initial investment of that police infrastructure, we're calling it the old infrastructure, still has life. I think it was only 2 years old, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Less than 3 years old. So there's still life left in that investment that the police department made. We're repurposing that and moving it to the village. And then we're going to rebuild that infrastructure in our new recommended, more enterprise class design to stabilize the village infrastructure. And again, extend the life of those assets as well. So those are the ongoing projects, and then kind of future state for strategy that we've talked about, or more strategic projects that we've talked about for the future, is new, faster circuits, internet circuits with redundancy, meaning they can fail over if one circuit fails from an ISP vendor, and then firewall implementations, which Aaron and Jeff are going to talk about after this discussion. And then the other big risk that the committee needs to be aware of is the network switching, which we referenced, and we can provide more detail around that as well. Is just the age of some of those network switching devices, which are 8+ years old now. So I think the committee needs to be mindful of those. So any questions on kind of projects? Anything I've covered so far?
Yeah, question, where does the fire department's information reside?
The fire department's information is on the PD infrastructure
That's
now.
right. Yeah, that's on the police.
So that's
departments.
ProPhoenix also? Is that what
Yeah,
you
well, they
guys use?
share the ProPhoenix anyway, right, John? Yeah.
So in the middle of this year, it came to my attention that ProPhoenix has not been reporting to the federal government correctly. Middle of this year, Department of Safety and Professional Services showed that last year, the department only ran 12 calls from all of our uploads. Unfortunately, our 2% money that we get from the state of Wisconsin is dictated by our call volume. So potentially, we could have lost up to $118,000 for 2023. I was able to remake all of the data from last year with some Excel files that I had, not Excel, XML files that I had saved, downloaded it into a free set of software from the state, converted it all over, and the people at the fire department went through and checked it for accuracy, resubmitted it to the federal government. Apparently, this has been a known problem by ProPhoenix since 2015, which is the year we started to use ProPhoenix. So with public safety's approval and with the extra ARPA funding that our state got, that distributed directly to the fire departments for EMS, we purchased a new set of software that we are in the process of starting to migrate over to, which is the same software that the state is using currently to monitor our calls and our reports. And it is also the same software that we have been using for the last, I'm not even sure how many years, probably since 2015 as well, for our ambulance reports. So we will be combining into that one set of software and moving away from ProPhoenix.
Is that hosted here? Is that a cloud-based?
That is a cloud-based program.
Okay.
Currently, the fire department, we utilize about 9 different programs to get our job done, and we're trying to condense it all down into as few as possible to try and A, save money, and B, to have a more robust system that reports accurately.
I understand that. I mean, it essentially wasn't reporting anything.
Correct. So we actually ran 2,472 calls last year, and according to the federal government and to the state, we ran 12.
Well, one a month, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Trustee Myers?
Do you gentlemen know about the system that John just talked about?
The ProPhoenix system or the
What they're
new?
going to?
I personally don't. That doesn't mean that we're not involved.
It's just a web-based program that we
So-
currently have. It's just
okay.
we're expanding onto the usage of it.
So you're just moving what you were doing in ProPhoenix over to this other software that was already in place?
Correct. Our ambulance service was utilizing Image Trend software for our patient care reports. And we were utilizing ProPhoenix for our personnel records, our fire reports, and our inspection reporting. Those 3 will then get migrated over to Image Trend, which is what we already had for our patient care reports.
Okay.
So it's not a new piece of software, it's just expanding its usage.
And it's something you just log on to.
Correct.
There's really, the maintenance is
There's no
included,
hardware
everything
yet,
is on.
yeah.
Thank you, John. The only reason why I mentioned it, because you just got done saying that whenever we get new computers and so on, we want to know what they have and so on and so forth, so we can integrate into the system that you have.
Well, that does beg the question that, you know, the fire department's had an issue with reporting. The police department uses ProPhoenix. They are upgrading it. What's the status there?
Of the ProPhoenix upgrade or?
Well, I just mean of the software itself. I mean, does the police department have to report similar?
You know, I think that, and John could probably comment on this as well, but I think ProPhoenix is one of the preferred software packages for police departments. And oftentimes fire departments are brought along because it also provides fire department data management. But I think that it's common that fire departments don't typically find it to be as useful as police departments. But, you know, my conversations with Chief Snow is I believe they're pretty satisfied with the way ProPhoenix has been working for the
So it's
police.
okay
police
for
services.
police operations.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Chief Snow was very happy with ProPhoenix, and they have not had any issues as far as their reporting on their side at all. ProPhoenix was originally created as a police department and CAD program. Fire was added in a little bit later on, and it hasn't been as robust for fire.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, Steve, thank you for reminding me, because I do remember that 8 years ago, when the county went over to the system started using ProPhoenix, it was for the police department. It wasn't for the fire department. Thank
Yeah,
you.
our other county customers all use ProPhoenix as well. So, and just from an upgrade perspective, from an application perspective, our team engaged with the ProPhoenix vendor last week to start discussions on how we
On
upgrade.
upgrading.
Yeah, so we're at the stage now where the new infrastructure is in place, the hardware is in place. We're ready to start upgrading the application now. So I kind of quickly, painted the picture, right, of the assessment process we went through. Really, in summary, again, the risks, it was an old environment, lots of issues, no standardization. I think it was like 4 weeks ago. I apologize. I don't know on the time frame, right? So the village outage, the village server outage, which incurred data corruption. So I just kind of want to go through and explain at a high level really what happened and most importantly, what are we doing to prevent it moving forward? So the main village server that runs the MSI software, on a Friday evening, the virtual server, the application server rapidly ran out of disk space, causing it to go down. The outage or the disk space issue created corruption within that server. We attempted to recover it and we found out that the actual virtual server itself was corrupt. The corruption that was incurred in that virtual server, we found was also in the backups from the last 30+ days. So we attempted multiple points in time backup and they all had the same corruption in there. We engaged Microsoft as well as multiple Capdata resources over the weekend to try multiple ways to recover this server using different tool sets. We engage with high levels of Microsoft support that specialize in the virtualization technology that was corrupt. And long story short, they spent all weekend and it came back as this server was unrecoverable. The data was unrecoverable. Unfortunately, the earliest good backup that we could restore from that was functional and not corrupt was 60 days old. So there was significant data loss within that window, to the village. This wasn't taken lightly. We had multiple resources, all hands on deck over the weekend when the outage occurred, trying to restore it. And we tried multiple options, but it was just unrecoverable. We see this a lot, right? Because of the way and again, not to get too technical, you're using a free version of a virtualization software, which we've seen this a lot in the past, and this is why we recommend a different a more enterprise-grade virtualization technology to mitigate these risks. Not to say that it wouldn't have occurred either way, but I think moving forward, to prevent this, it's moving the infrastructure from the police department, that previous investment, as I mentioned, which is going to start actually this week. We're going to rebuild that with the new, more enterprise-grade virtualization software, more industry best practice configuration of that new server environment. And then we're going to convert all the village servers to this new format, just like we've done for police. That will stabilize, improve the environment there. And then we'll be able to better leverage the new backup technologies we put in place as well. So that's already started. As of this week, as I mentioned, we'll be relocating that hardware and then going through kind of that rebuild and migration phase. But again, I think, from Capdata's perspective, the data loss isn't taken lightly. We understand it was significant impact to the village and it still is. But I think, I think the message from us, we're working towards improving, long-term the technologies here at the village.
So as an aside, we will have that update as far as data recovery at our village board meeting later this evening. So elephant in the room, 60 days, and we didn't know there was anything corrupted.
No, because we would only because the server was operational, so we wouldn't have known it was corrupt unless we had to restore from a backup. So you know,
That wasn't, yeah,
yeah, we,
wasn't tested.
it was never tested within that 60-day window, no. So,
Just one virtual that went down?
correct, yes. The police department server went down a couple of weeks after, but we were able to recover that one on the new infrastructure.
So just for reference, virtuals, so you now have a computer box that's so
Physical.
powerful that you can run multiple servers on one box. All right? So one virtual means that one server inside of that went bad.
Yeah. So I think there's like 20 servers probably on the village, or
Yeah,
less.
I think probably less than that.
Okay. So.
To be fair, I mean, this issue with that virtualization technology it's happened before, right? So that's one of the reasons why we recommend switching to this other platform. It's more stable. It's run, you know, as far as market cap wise, they're easily the leaders in the marketplace for virtualization. And you know, their software is just more tested. It's a paid for software, and there's a reason for it.
The other thing that kept going through my mind, and I think this was a lot of questions from the trustees the other night, was I guess the speed of implementation right now, for lack of a better term, like, why aren't we moving faster? Is this resources? Is it your resources? Is it the village? You know, who's establishing this timeline, or is it a combined type of thing?
As far as,
I mean, right now, we probably can't go fast enough to get
Yeah.
some of this stuff recovered,
mean-
but you prioritize, but I'm saying, you know, are we a bottleneck? Is it your time?
no, and I actually don't think it's our time. I mean, I think we have resources dedicated to this weekly. Yeah, so
Supply chain after they place the order.
You got to come up and.
come on, Matt.
I'm sorry, Matt Shufflu, Capital Data. Just to sort of comment on that, after we made the recommendation, so everything you guys have was ordered, and with the supply chain being and what it was, really sort of pushed out that implementation timeframe as well. So sadly to say that with 60 days of corruption, you guys, the village owns everything you need to repair this. It just was the timing of getting everything in and then getting it turned over to the new stuff. So I think the supply chain and the time to get everything ordered and in-house took a little bit longer than what would normally take in non-COVID times. So.
It's true, they are longer. You have any questions, guys?
I have a lot of questions. These two gentlemen to my left and right, no computers and so on and so forth. Dennis doesn't know diddlywad. But I know we got a problem. And the
I
problem
think
that-
there's a
and
problem, but
we have a
we're,
problem that was, that somehow or another, I understand what Matt was just saying, that it takes time to get all the equipment and so on that you have analyzed that we would need after you came in here. And then this committee actually approved going forward with that equipment as such. Do you have all the equipment that you requested in your presence right now?
yes.
So it's just.
So the new
As far as
equipment,
this-
yeah, as far as the Police Pro Phoenix project, the new equipment was installed, the migrations and the installation of that project was completed as of last week. And now this week we're flipping to move, start the village.
One of the things, a lot of things that you mentioned was the fact that the village was behind in all this other stuff, unlicensed and so on and so forth. So are you saying to me that it was the village's fault and this thing would not have occurred if we would have had equipment like you are suggesting that we have going forward?
It would have been less likely, yes. Because again, the current state is unlicensed free software, configured in, again, I like to use the term enterprise, right? But in a non-best practice setting, right? So configuration.
We
So,
had old operating systems in place.
Yeah.
Free virtualization platform. We had storage that was running out of space. That's part of the reason, that all cost money to do those repairs. not maintaining the software to, constantly stay at the most current version that the manufacturer recommends. That's another factor in this. So I think now that we've started to get all this equipment in place and we're going to move over to a more standardized enterprise type solution, we'll be able to maintain that as a current.
It'll be a much more stable, best practice environment.
Right.
Like I say, it's hard to be able to say, well, could have done this sooner or whatever per se. I mean, it did happen, but as you had identified early in your presentation, that a lot of these things were out in 2018.
Mhm.
That's a long time.
Yeah. I mean, every time
Is
we,
that something that you noticed from the very beginning when you were analyzing what we had and so on and so forth?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
We identified those as risks.
Would that have made any difference? And I understand it's kind of hard per se. Would it made any difference to be able to do something different than the way you actually attacked it?
No, I think we were, I think in all honesty, we were maintaining the current environment and trying to make, best practice configuration changes as best we could with what was there available. But then, Steve and Aaron, committed to the strategy, and we were, and the committee here, you executed on purchasing the new hardware. So I don't think we could have moved any faster. Again, with the supply chain as well, to mitigate this risk.
One of the things you had mentioned in regard to this, you have seen this happen before in other systems that you've been helping people out, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, this particular software has had this corruption issue happen before. It's not uncommon, fortunately. for
Yeah,
that
and
software.
so again, so the virtualization software is from Microsoft and it's free. That's why I think you've been leveraging it within the village. Microsoft has stopped selling that now, so it's end of life.
Was it end of life as you?
No,
noted?
no.
2018?
The version you had is the last version.
Okay.
So, but again, I think that kind of shows that even Microsoft's not moving forward with that technology anymore.
One of the things that you had mentioned is we had a lot of equipment, basically speaking, that me as a homeowner probably had,
Correct.
shouldn't have had in this system here,
Correct.
which puts us at fault in regard to that aspect.
Yes. Yeah. I think, a lot of things have been purchased and with no strategy, in mind, right? And I think when we talk about kind of the firewall purchases, I know the police and the fire have made recent firewall purchases, so they have reasonably new equipment, but, they're different firewalls, not no standards there, and really no thought of a more holistic strategy for the village. They've all been point solutions, right? Purchased just for that immediate need.
What type of backup system do we have?
What do you have now?
Yeah. What did we have before you gentlemen came
Or it's
in?
just flash drives.
Yeah, it was, I
You understand
don't
what
even
I'm
know the
saying?
name, because I
It
never,
was also unlicensed too. I can't remember.
it's one that we never come across very often, so I can't tell you the name. And basically not a market leader backup solution. And again, it was all pretty much like thumb drives, USB drives that it was backing up to.
Stuff that people would do at the end of the day,
Right.
per se. Backup.
Like you do with your home laptop.
Which unfortunately, thumb drives are a huge security risk now.
Yeah.
So most places block out the USB ports from those.
But again, now you're using the market leaders in that space now, Veeam.
Was that WASABI?
Wasabi is a cloud storage
system,
solution.
Which a lot of companies are doing per se, probably within
Yeah,
the last 6 years.
This is kind of a leading backup security design now. So your previous backup solution, you only had one copy of your backup on that thumb drive. So you lost the thumb drive, you lost the backup. Now everything's backing up to
multiple.
the police department, and then it's sent to the cloud. So you've got two
Two
copies.
lanes, right.
Yeah.
So basically speaking, there isn't anything that your company did wrong.
Well, I mean, I would,
understand
I
the
wouldn't,
question.
sorry?
I say, I understand the question. That's one of these things, could have, should have,
Yeah, it's best effort, right? You know, we inherited an environment that was probably a lot worse than we initially thought. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
you're welcome.
Bill, you got any questions?
No. My only concern is a lot of people have said. A lot of people have asked me, it's why didn't we catch this? Why the server went down and we didn't catch this?
Down below, isn't it?
So I mean, that's, I've had several people say, well, how did this happen? Shouldn't this have been caught? Isn't this something you would have looked at initially when when the contract was signed and you evaluated the systems, that this could be a potential?
I think you've got to understand that this wasn't a pristine environment that we inherited, right? So
Correct.
there was at multiple levels, there was capacity and resource issues. So a lot of this environment is, spinning plates, right, on a daily basis because, space was limited.
But wouldn't that make you kind of want to evaluate it even more and really look at it harder?
Well, I
versus
think,
some other
I
things?
think we'd already evaluated it and made the recommendations of this is the remediation plan, which was the investments in the police department infrastructure. Then we could leverage, those existing assets in the village. So we'd already identified it and we were working towards, that remediation. So,
But just a comment on what Craig was saying. So we identified it as an issue, but with that software that we were talking about, that is no longer, there's no monitoring to that software. So for example, the new software you guys are putting in, we'll be able to monitor and we can be alerted of things that are happening. With the old software, there was no monitoring of that environment. So.
and I think it's just a space issue as well, right? You were running at 95% capacity, right? Straight out of the gate. So there's only so much physical room you have to play with, right? So it was a balancing act of just keeping things operationally, keeping lights on as best we can, try and improve things where we can, but then also make sure we're executing on a long-term strategy to remediate permanently.
I mean, I'm not condemning or criticizing, but it just is, where were the priorities? What were the things that we thought could happen and be prepared for them? And a server crash is.
May I just
Yeah, Steve.
jump in a little bit as well, because it's something, that's a question I've given a lot of thought to as well over the last 3 weeks. And if I could just take a minute, kind of give a little bit of a timeline and some background on what we've been doing over the past year on this issue, on these issues. We've spent a good part of 2021 going through an RFP process, ended up selecting Capital Data to come in. They started in, I want to say it was late November of 2021, and came in and started to do this assessment that took a little over a month. I remember getting together after the beginning of January and kind of getting all of this bad news that we had all of these issues going on, and talking about the issue of priorities, and knowing that we couldn't, as much as we might want to get everything done at once, we couldn't get everything done at once, either from Capital Data side or the village side, or getting the equipment. We looked at some of the priorities, and number one, you know, we all agreed up front that the public safety functions had to be the priority. And that was where they're working right now and where they're near completion is upgrading the servers over at the police department that, you know, dispatch relies on and police and fire rely on. And that was the priority. In addition to that, some of the other things that have been done in the last 11 months, prior to, you know, a year ago, our entire email system would have been on the same server. I believe it was the same server. And we would have lost all of that as well. That was all moved to the cloud. Everything, all of the issues with the unlicensed account had to be reconciled and fixed before that could be moved onto the cloud. So that was all completed. And when we're going through the process of restoration, a lot of what we're actually able to get is attachments to emails or things that are helping with that process. One of the other major things that they mentioned is this cloud-based backup. And unfortunately, it didn't work when this server went down. When the police server, which we're also working on replacing, went down 2 weeks ago, it did work. And that was one of the other priorities, so that that process would be changed and backups would be done to you know, this cloud-based backup system. That was a huge step. Another thing that they touched on, which was a major project, was the dual authentication. Multi-factor identification, which is something that we had to have for our insurance policies for to get coverage in case we were hacked or something along those lines. So those were some of the high priorities. The server, it was important. You know, I know I've been thinking of some what ifs here and there. We're very close to getting that actually replaced. We're almost done at the police department. They're going to take one of the newer servers that's still in support from the police department, move it over here, put all of the functions that were on the server that failed onto that. So we're weeks away from having that fixed. So it is a frustrating thing. But there's been a lot of work done, and there still are some other things that are risks out there too that we need to keep moving along on as well. And I think we've identified them. I think there's a strategy in place. You know, definitely any place we can look where we can move faster, either on the village side or capital data side, we need to do that. But we've gotten a lot done, and I think we have a good plan to try to address the rest of the things that are out there.
Just as a follow-up, you know, disaster recovery plans are important. And I can tell you right now, I'm not the best over the years of testing restorations, but that's part of a DR plan, is to regularly test your backups and restore a portion of it to make sure that they are valid. And thank goodness it was for the police department. Unfortunately, we lost a bunch of data that we had to recover on the other one. So as this whole thing goes on, I would say we need some testing in place for that.
Yeah, agreed.
Nothing more.
Anything else, guys? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. With that, we're going to move on. I think you guys are still up on this one. You've done some assistance on this, and that is item B, Village Internet and Firewall contracts with Spectrum, Ethoplex, and Fortinet in an amount not to exceed $64,513. And Aaron's coming up to discuss this.
I can have them stay up if they want to say some things on this, but this is basically to help with part of that recovery. So one of the way that things are backed up through the police department is the information here is transferred over to the police department and then backed up on their system in the cloud. So one of the things that we're hurting over here is our internet service. So we do not have enough. We need to increase that. So two of the things that you have are two different internet contracts. One's with Ethoplex and one's with Spectrum. They're 3-year contracts. And these contracts, the price actually gets reduced, the amount that we spend annually, but it is a 3-year contract that would need to be approved. However, this would help in the redundancy of internet services throughout all of our facilities. The other thing that's connected to this request is also the purchase of firewalls up to the extent of $64,513 with a 5-year warranty that would then be implemented at these facilities.
Trustee Myers.
What's the internet, what's the speed that they're giving us? I thought I saw 200.
It varies per facility.
Does.
Yep. So I believe it's 200 at the fire department.
And at police, I
With
believe
Etho,
both.
and it depends on which contract, right? Because there's different speeds from each. So one's going to be the primary and one's going to be the secondary, and it depends on facility. So at the fire department, Ethoplex is going to be the primary, where Spectrum would be the secondary, and then at the police department, Spectrum would be the primary and Ethoplex would be the secondary. So they have different speeds, but.
And,
Would you like to say
what's Fortinet? Is that the load balancing?
That's load balancing SD-WAN. It's a firewall / SD-WAN appliance. Essentially what that means is, as traffic it can automatically understand what the fastest way is to get the data to the internet, or, and if there's a route that goes down, so let's say, the Spectrum service goes down, even the entire Spectrum network goes down, we can actually reroute the traffic for fire, police, and the village. We can reroute it all through Ethoplex with basically a momentary outage. That's it. So probably not something that a user would even notice. And vice versa. If Ethoplex goes down, we have the ability to reroute all of that traffic automatically through the SD-WAN application. And it can utilize both applications at the same time. So technically, the 200 meg that the fire department, for example, has to the internet can also be leveraged through the police department. So those are a total of 400 meg at each location because of the fact that you can route traffic both ways. That's the intelligence of the SD-WAN application. It understands best paths.
There's an appliance at each place?
There's an appliance, yes, correct. There's 2 appliances at the fire department. There's 2 appliances at police and 2 at Village Hall. And the whole idea there is each of those 3 locations would have resiliency if a device fails, or if a carrier fails, Spectrum or Ethoplex, right? So you have the ability to have any of those circumstances happen, and the data would continue to flow. It would just maybe take a different route. The other locations would have a single appliance and a single carrier, which I believe is just DPW and Senior Center. And that's just was a cost decision.
Is Spectrum fiber?
Spectrum fiber and Ethoplex. Ethoplex has a combination.
Wireless, right? Or is
They have a combination of dedicated fiber, similar to Spectrum. That's at the fire department. They're actually leveraging the fire department for their customer service, right? So they're bringing in dedicated fiber because of that reason. The rest of them will be wireless shot. I believe all from the fire department, correct?
Yeah, so the main backbone for the internet comes into the fire department's backyard through Time Warner, CenturyLink, and AT&T. Ethoplex buys it wholesale from them and then sends it out as their service. They utilize our radio tower to send out their service. Which is how I became aware of them. There is a tower agreement that they have with the village that they pay us their monthly fee for our tower usage. And then on top of that, they would offer us their basic level of service at no charge. The reason for the 200 by 200 at the fire station is after I noticed them and explained to them what their contract said that they didn't know existed. I was able to negotiate 200 by 200 for less per month than I was paying for 25 by 25 by Time Warner. So that's kind of how we ended up in this position with looking at these different options.
I think one of the important points to mention is that we're building this kind of resilient network. I like to call it a mesh network. You think about like a netting or something. So there's multiple connections, and again, intelligent routing. But the other thing is, as we've made the recommendations to the speeds of the network or the bandwidth of each of the locations, we've adjusted some down, like the fire department and police department, and adjusted some up. So the idea is, we're trying to better allocate the bandwidth. We've looked at all of the reporting on what's being utilized at the fire department and at the police department, and we could see that they have big circuits that are barely being used comparatively. And Village Hall, for example, has a 10 meg up connection, which is basically being slammed all the time, right? It's just not big enough. So what we've done is kind of more accurately allocate the bandwidth throughout all of the entities. And the net is going to be, from a cost perspective, a savings to the total spend that the village will spend on telecoms expenses. So that's also helpful because of the fact that Ethoplex is using you guys as a service provider, as your facilities for a service provider. So that helps with the savings as well.
Does it make any difference how many people are on that same system at
They're-
any given time?
They're going to protect to make sure that the village gets what they're owed.
I've heard that before. I'm sorry.
Well, we
It's
could-
dedicated, right? So
Yeah, it's
dedicated
dedicated.
means that they have to provide that.
Yeah, they're providing what they call a quality of service on
Yeah.
that connection to make sure that you guys don't get slowed down by other connections. And it's valid. It works. We saw that work from Spectrum's perspective when we were doing backups. The backups made that circuit. It was a 10 meg connection, and it actually went to 12 meg, and it stayed that way for nearly a month. It didn't move off of 12 meg. So Spectrum truly did give you that full. They gave you 20% more actually during that whole month, and never went down. So you guys used it, and it worked.
So basically speaking, what we had from before wasn't being utilized correctly.
It wasn't being utilized in the correct spots, right? So you had
Correct spots is
you
what
had
I
too
said.
much here and not enough here, right? So we've adjusted that so that you have, more balanced bandwidth across all the locations. And again, multiple routes for the big locations so that you can use circuits on both, the both routes. Or if one fails, you can just use the one.
So you don't think we need 400?
I do not. You definitely don't need a gig. We've seen it in the data. Yeah, it's not necessary.
Thank you.
All right, committee, we need a recommendation to the village board. for this.
Motion to approve new business B.
I'll second it, but my question is that total 64,513, that's for everything there?
That's for all the firewalls. So to connect to this, so there's two 3-year contracts that need to be signed, which the amount will be less than what we're currently paying, but they're 3-year contracts, one with Spectrum and one with Ethoplex. And then there's going to be the purchase through Capital Data for the firewalls. So that's what's all included.
That's my dollar total.
It would be that 64,513 for the firewalls. And then the,
1 year?
and then the 2 contracts,
Is that for 1 year?
3 years, 3-year contracts
The
for both.
firewalls
I
is
know,
a
but
5.
the credit,
Oh, I'm sorry.
The firewalls is a 5-year solution.
Oh, a 5-year warranty with those
yeah, on the
firewalls.
warranty.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I know that's a large,
One other benefit as well about this design is that we all have the same firewall devices now at each of the locations. For right now, Craig mentioned it's a bunch of home grade equipment for the most part. So we have a standard solution that we can do some centralized management on. They're enterprise class firewalls. They have the SD-WAN capabilities. But the other important thing from a security perspective is that we're changing the design so no longer do all of the sites have access to the internet directly, which makes it very difficult to control when bad stuff gets in, malware, ransomware attacks, things like that. we're limiting that to 2 locations now because of this design. And with that, we can better secure, they're called ingress egress points, but the point is we have less openings out to the internet that we have to defend against.
Yeah.
Correct. So we're limiting that. We have 2 still, so that if one fails, we can go the other way. But we're really making it kind of a easier environment to manage and try and secure to keep the bad stuff out.
What's the lead time right now?
Matt. 12 to 14 weeks right now.
That's pretty fast.
That's fast in this space. When from the network switch perspective, it's much higher, just a FYI.
Yeah, I know switches are way.
Yeah. And that's the gear that you guys have, that's like 4 years past end of life already. So that probably should be, really the next thing you guys look at.
All right. We have a motion to approve item B. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that'll go to the village board tonight. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming, guys. With that, we will move on to item C, battalion chief's pay.
Currently in the fire department, we are having some wage compression issues. For example, our battalion chiefs are earning approximately $80,000 a year, give or take a couple dollars. And with the hiring of a lieutenant that we recently did, the lieutenant's wage is 77,000. Excuse me, the base wage was 77,000 plus to get a 5% bump for being a lieutenant. And then a bunch of other holiday bonuses and acting battalion chief duties. We're looking at anywhere for $84,000 to $87,000 for a lieutenant. So from $4,000 to $7,000 more than our battalion chiefs are making right now. In the chart they gave you, which was put out by the village a few months ago, the battalion chiefs are currently in position number 5, with the median or the average comparable for a battalion chief being at 92,987 throughout the area that we live in. In the past, we were sending a lot of people to school due to the nature of our department. So we had a very robust training line item to send people to conferences and trainings. Currently with our configuration of our department, most of those people come into our department with those certifications currently. I'd like to take the money in those line items, which I believe is 7720 and 7730, and move those up into the salary sections to get our battalion chiefs up to the average for the area of 92,987. I have already moved that in my budget for next year, so next year's budget would reflect that already.
Okay, so you already moved those line items, or you moved the money from those line items?
For next year's budget, I'd like to just bring it up now for the remainder of this year to provide them at least to make a little bit more than what their lower ranking officers and fires are making.
Motion to approve new business C.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion. The position, like position 5, that's where they are right now. So that doesn't change at all, right?
No, that is
They're
still
still in the
that
wage range of those. So the only thing is just the additional
Correct.
wage. Okay.
And that amount is 5,000, did you say? Thereabouts?
Position.
Because you're talking about 87 before, right?
So they are currently making 80.
For sure.
So this would be 12,000
Yes,
each.
thank you.
Okay.
Jeez. Thanks, John.
Very good. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Sorry we're going a little late here, but we do have some other items on the agenda tonight. So we'll try to get through these as quick as possible, but they are very important. So
A lot of money.
let's go item D, resolution 31, 2022, initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $205,000 for the library HVAC upgrades.
Good evening. Thank you. Phil Costin with Ellers. Good to be back with you. Round three, I think, of this topic. We continue to make modifications to the plan that we've kind of laid out for you. We have, I think, brought 5 different options to you. We eliminated for sure one of them just because of the overall cost was quite a bit higher than the others. And then, if you recall, we had the traveling option that we've explored as well. And that traveling option, I think, is really our preferred, and I'll get into that in a little bit as I get into this. I'm not going to spend as much time on each of these slides just because I've talked about this to some extent already. But what I wanted to do is kind of hit on a few of the items that we have here for you. Again, just identifying what the planned time frame is. This is really a multi-year plan. And we, in most of the options, have built in the legacy projects that we're really talking about tonight is the DPW building financing. But we've modeled out a longer range plan for the village. I've talked already about kind of the annual growth rates, the conservative, relatively conservative interest rates that have been used, and tried to kind of make this, if anything, more conservative in our approach to show you what the potential impacts would be. So again, I've addressed all these items before. We have two different nuances here that are a little bit different than what I showed you last time. The first is that as we walk through each of these options, there's an allocation that we are now showing that roughly 10% of the debt service on the new building would be paid from the water utility and 12% from the sewer utility. That's in part due to the usage of the building by each of those utilities. And so they're going to pay a portion of the debt service, which ultimately results in driving down that tax rate number that I've been focused on quite a bit. Doesn't eliminate it by any means, but it certainly helps a little bit as we talk about the different options that are available. We've also added a relatively small library HVAC project that was $202,000. And that is needed and been added to this financing. The one change there, even though we're doing a 20-year issue here, we amortize that piece over 10 years, just a small, more in line with how you would typically fund those type of projects. So it's included as part of this bond issue. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we've allocated, again, that piece to a shorter amortization schedule. And that's been added here as well. This, again, would be a 20-year bond issue. And it has multiple components. It has TID 9 has a piece of this. DPW building is the majority of it. Then we also have, as part of this, that HVAC for the library as part of it. And that's how we get ultimately to the dollar amount that we are talking about. We're issuing bonds. And as a result, what happens when you issue bonds is that you have to borrow the money kind of in silos. So you can't really move the money around. So as you'll see, there are separate resolutions by purpose. There's the DPW building, the HVAC for the library, and TID 9. So the monies will have to stay kind of in segregated accounts for those purposes, and they can't really be moved between. Now, there's a little nuance there between TID 9. If you recall, some of the public infrastructure is being paid for out of TID 9. That'll service both TID 9 and the DPW building. So the monies can move a little bit probably there just based on final design and ultimately the final billing of those costs. But again, 20-year financing is what's been identified for all but the HVAC project. So here's where we spent quite a bit of time last time going through each of these options that were available. And if you recall, we had 3 different ways we were looking at this. One was to take some fund balance and drive down the overall project costs. So take roughly $3.6 million of the village's fund balance, which is you'll still be above your fund balance policy. even by doing so, and taking that money and reducing the amount that's being borrowed. That's option one, and we've run a couple of those scenarios. Option two was that we're going to take that fund balance and we're going to use it to affect the debt service levy. So the actual, when you borrow the money, there's a debt service levy. We can apply money to reduce the amount that's being put on the debt levy annually as a way to kind of drive down the mill rate. And then the third, which was that driving option, was since you borrow roughly $3.5 million annually for capital, why not just take that money and eliminate capital borrowing altogether, which we identified in 2023. Interest rates have been rising, at least of late. And so when it all came down to it and we really analyzed it, we think that option probably makes the most sense. And I've highlighted that as the final option on this page. Why we think it makes sense is really threefold. One is it does reduce the kind of overall principal and interest of this finance plan, and it makes it one of the more affordable options. Two, it does give you flexibility in what you do with the reserve fund. At the end of the day, you could still apply some money to the fund balance, or you could apply money for other purposes if you chose to. This gives you that flexibility. And then thirdly, and maybe most important, we start to see a bigger drop. Remember, I talked about this plan time was 22 through 28. That doesn't mean in 29 you never borrow money again. It just means we got to make sure that we have debt service dropping off. Under this scenario, we can really affect that and really have the debt start dropping off, enabling you some flexibility in the future to take on other capital projects. So this would require you borrow the full amount and then use again fund balance. Again, it'd be a decision made by the village board at a future meeting for your 23 capital projects as opposed to doing your normal capital borrowing. So that's the recommendation that I think we feel kind of hits all the check marks that we have been talking about through this process. Hard to read. There's a lot of numbers here, but at the end of the day, we ran 6 or 7 different scenarios for the village to better determine kind of all these impacts, impact to tax rate, impact to the debt levy, impact to the fund balance, impact to your debt, the amount of debt capacity that remains. And again, in our thought working with staff is that this probably gives you the most flexibility in the future. And then this is the summary of each of those options that you have in front of you. So timing of this, again, tonight, what we're asking of you is to have you authorize the sale, and it's a parameter sale. So the process here that we've laid out is similar to the process that we've always gone through with the village. And that is tonight you would authorize, meaning you give us permission to start the process of preparing the documents necessary to sell the bonds. That's tonight. We have a rating call tentatively scheduled with Moody's Investor Service. We got to get early on with them just to make sure that we can hit these different timelines. We were talking with them today. And we tentatively have a call with them scheduled for November 1st. If things don't proceed tonight, we'll just cancel that. The bids will be received and approved on November 17th. That's when the rest of the information will come back to you, what the final rates were, who the winning bidder was, how many bids you received, what the ultimate tax impact is once we kind of piece this all together. And then the funds would be wired to the village on December 1st. Last couple of sales we've done as parameter sales, and we're proposing that here as well. And again, it's not overly scientific. Why? Most municipalities, and I'm never home on a Monday or Tuesday, as my wife knows, meet on Mondays and Tuesdays. That means bond sales happen on Monday and Tuesdays all over the nation, not just in Wisconsin. And so you compete with everybody if you issue bonds on Monday and Tuesdays. If you look at the bond buyer, no reason to look at that except for me. The bond buyer shows all the competitive sales that are happening state and nationally, and you can see just loads on Monday and Tuesday, and it diminishes later. We like selling, especially a larger issue like this, on a Wednesday or Thursday. So we try to pick one of those dates, and we feel it enables you to secure more bidders. You're just not competing as much as against other firms, and then other communities. And then the second is if we see a market change, something occurs in the market substantially that could affect rates. When you do a parameter sale, we can just pull it without having to come back to the board and say, give us authorization to delay the sale. We can actually just pull it working with staff and say, look, market is crazy today, tomorrow, this week. Fed's meeting again in a day, whatever it is. We have the ability to kind of delay the sale to try to better time the market. Not that we can perfectly time the market, but that's the process. So tonight you have really 4 resolutions that are in your packet, and the 4 resolutions again tie back to those purposes. So the first, if you don't mind, I'll just talk about each one of those, and then okay, all right. So the first resolution, item D, is for that HVAC for the library. I said it was 202,000. It's 205 because a portion of the issuance expenses get allocated to each one of these. The second is the general obligation bond in the amount not to exceed 40,575,000. That's for the DPW building and any related infrastructure. F is the initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed 3,850,000. That's for TID number 9. And then the last G kind of brings all 3 of these together, the 3 previous together, and gives us authorization to proceed with an amount not to exceed that full amount. I want one last thing that I didn't mention is this does also refinance the note anticipation note. If you recall, earlier this year, there was a short-term issue that was taken out to deal with a lot of initial probably engineering costs and soft costs related to the DPW building, also related to TID 9. We're refinancing this as part of these issues. So within these numbers is the refinancing of that note anticipation note. So that'll go away completely once this bond is put in place.
Yeah, I have one question on if we use the option where we're going to utilize our funds now, our reserves, for basically the first year, right? Do we have to get bonding now? Can't we wait a year?
I mean, that's certainly an option. I think Steve could probably talk better to the dollar amounts that we are talking about that are coming in.
The option 5 that we're recommending, the way that would work related to next year's capital budget, we have been talking about using $3.5 million roughly in reserves to help offset the debt service costs. When we started looking at it, that's also about the amount that we typically borrow each year for capital projects. So what option 5 would do is it would not affect what we borrow this fall for the DPW facility, but then we would pay for next year's capital budget out of reserves.
Because it's
and
all
not
coming out
issue-
for debt service.
Correct,
Yep.
correct. And then we would not issue bonds in the spring like we normally do.
Yeah, it's coming out of your debt, your actual general fund reserves to be able to pay for those costs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Trustee Myers.
But isn't there a difference in regard to what the rate will be versus the one that you're eliminating, what that interest rate is, which is probably less?
Well, yes, you're issuing 10-year notes in that example. So you'd pay a little less in interest. I couldn't tell you where interest rates are going to be between now and when you borrow money next year. But what it also does is it eliminates the fact that you borrow $3.5 million and amortize it over those first 10 years. And if you look at these models, the first 10 years are the tough years because we're amortizing a lot of projects over the next 10 years. And so it eliminates that logjam, if you will, and affects the tax rate more beneficially by eliminating that borrowing.
So basically speaking, I thought you were talking about option 3, but now I think I heard Steve, you said option 5?
Yeah, it's the option that we
We're
kind of
gonna
brought
pay.
forward.
I just
The
wonder
traveling
what-
option.
Traveling
I'm
option.
sorry, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but taking that total amount of 44, what percentage is that going to give us in regard to our total borrowing, which is probably about 100 million?
Oh, you're gonna, if you
Be around
implement,
55%.
the entire plan as been laid out, which includes $20 million for a police facility in 25, it'll take you to about 65% of your borrowing capacity. And that's eliminating the borrow in 2023. So it has impact, but it's really the DPW building and the police facility. I mean, combined, those two are, $65 million in capital borrowing. So it does take you to about 65% of your borrowing capacity.
And when do you think this will go out in regard to bidding? November?
If it's authorized today, we'll take this, again, we have the Moody's call on November 1st.
Right.
We'll finalize the resolution, probably, I mean, the official statement, the first week in November. And it'll be out for bid, the second week in November.
And when does the Fed meet next?
It'll be after that date.
I hope so.
It will be.
Not good. Thank you, Phil.
Also, these resolutions will be on the village board meeting
Yeah, I
tonight.
know,
This
I
is
know.
just a recommendation from us. Yes,
If you'd like, I could kind of address some of the questions or comments that came up during public comment.
yeah,
About,
please. I was going to ask that. Yep.
About the library.
Sure. So included in one of these 4 resolutions is the money for the library HVAC system. And that project is actually not a maintenance project. It is an upgrade to an asset, and under generally accepted accounting principles, it's eligible to be capitalized. It is a long-term, it's a fixed asset and something that we don't have to borrow for, but we can borrow for. And you may recall that there were some discussions in previous GGF meetings as well as village board meetings about the library HVAC system, and the board looked at some of the options that were brought up during public comment. It could be paid for out of reserves. It could be paid for out of ARPA funds. It could be paid for out of the surplus from 2021. The direction from the village board was to include this in the bonding authorization. So that's what we've done here. And that still is an option. I would say, the other clarification, that we would not be issuing 20-year bonds for this. Would be amortized over 10 years. So it would be paid off in that time frame. So those are options that are still, available to the committee and the village board, but this is consistent with the direction we received previously.
All right. Thank you. Committee.
New business, motion to new business D. To approve as
You're up.
Presented.
To approve resolution 31, 2022.
I didn't get the number, yes. Yeah, the 31, 2022, yes.
All right. We have a motion to approve
I'll second.
resolution 31-2022. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E, resolution 32, 2022, initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $40,575,000 for the DPW building construction.
I'll move for its approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Any discussion?
Here again, that's DPW building.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item F, resolution 33-2022, initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $3,850,000 for TID number 9 project costs.
Motion to approve F, Resolution 33, 2022.
I will second that.
All right, a motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 34-2022, resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $44,630,000 general obligation corporate purpose bond series 2022E.
I'll move for the adoption of Resolution 34-2022.
Motion, second.
All right, we have a motion. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to item F, Resolution 30-2022, resolution to amend the public grant program policy. And Administrator Krecklo, you going to give us some idea on
Yeah,
this?
I can give you a brief summary of what this item is. This is actually not a new policy. It's a policy that was adopted by the village board in 2015 that creates a program where the village, and it's very rarely used, but is able to provide grant money for permits or fees like that come up for nonprofit groups that are holding events. Just I'll give you the quick example.
Golf thing.
The VFW each year has a Christmas tree sale, and I know this is something we've struggled with at the village board here. They've requested in the past that the temporary use permit that they're required to get be waived, because it would, otherwise the cost of the permit would eat up a significant portion of the funds that they're able to raise through the event. However, the policy did not allow, and let me back up, and our village attorney will tell us that we can't waive fees like that, that if we're going to have a fee, we need to charge it consistently in all circumstances. But we can have a policy where we reimburse the organization for those fees. The previous policy did not allow for reimbursement of temporary use fees. So what this does, if you look at the very last couple of lines in the policy, there's a friends that was added that includes temporary use permits. So this would change it, that would allow for that utilization in the future. All of those have to come before the village board to be approved. And like I've said, I can count on one hand in the last 5 years the number of times that this has come forward.
Questions?
Yes, question, Trustee Myers.
Steve, is this the same kind of program that we had, that we authorized money in front in regard to the golf thing? Or is that a different program? It came forth to us trying to get some money that we had. We tried to get it from businesses and so on and so forth.
You mean the loan for this? Yeah.
This is different. This is
different.
Yeah, this is different. That was the economic development loan program. Yeah, this is different. This is for fundraising type events, and it's just basically to offset the cost of fees that the village charges to hold those events.
And where does the money come from? How is it funded?
In the past, we have basically funded it using the revenue that the organization pays for the fee.
Just give it back.
Yeah, so if
So it's
there's
a
$100,
cycle.
if they have to pay $100 fee for a permit, then we accept that, we bring it in as a revenue, and then we pay them the $100 back as a grant.
Okay, and so the only reason why this is being brought forward in regard, as you mentioned before, is that change in the last line, I think it was.
Right, that's correct.
Right, which allows for temporary use of.
Motion to approve new business H.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Great. With that, we have no unfinished business. We have a couple reports to look at, monthly financial summaries for accounts payable. Are there any questions on that?
The only thing I was going to suggest, if we could just put this to our next meeting and go through all of this, looking at the time.
It shouldn't take long though. It'll just take a minute to get through this unless.
I
you-
can make
you
it
have
easy.
some
I'll just say I
questions.
don't have any questions. I don't have any questions.
Any questions, Bill?
I don't.
How's that?
All right, with that, we will schedule our next meeting, which is the third Monday in November, which would be the 21st
Thank you.
at 6 PM in this boardroom. And with that, we are adjourned. We will reset here about 5 minutes before the village board meeting begins. Thank you. Thank you all.